They thought I was just another spreadsheet lady, so they fired me. What were they unaware of? 90% of the business is mine. Have you ever had a moment where time seems to stops? Martin burst into my office, like he owned the air I breathed as I was halfway through going over quarterly sales projections. Nothing fancy, just figures and charts that had been subtly outperforming our division for 3 years in a row. Don't knock. No civility. Just a storm in entitlement and cheap cologne. Like a youngster showing off his most recent crayon work, he threw a folder onto my desk and yelled, "Elena, we must speak. Right now." I examined the folder. Then came Martin Ree, our affable, ostentatious, MBA-wielding head of operations who became a corporate parasite. The man who didn't know my name until someone informed him that I wasn't an administrator. I remained composed, though. I never lost my cool. I gestured to the chair opposite from me and added, "Of course." He did not sit. Naturally, he didn't. Equality would have been assumed. With a hurried voice, he declared, "We're restructuring the leadership team. The board is taking a different approach, and to be honest, we need leaders, not just spreadsheet managers." I blinked. Only once. "Give it time to sink in." "You're letting me go?" I inquired, not yet feeling irritated, simply puzzled. Martin smirked at me, the kind of look that frat boys practice in front of mirrors before presenting to investors. "We shouldn't be overly theatrical. You are being relieved of your duties." With instant effect. No evaluation of performance, no warning. The fact that my team recently reported the largest revenue rise the organization has had in 3 years was not mentioned. I took a moment to process that. I nearly laughed because it was so ridiculous. "Could you tell me why?" His gaze remained fixed. "You don't see. Task management, not people management, is your forte. And let's face it, this sector needs strong, self-assured leadership. You haven't exactly shown certain traits." Oh, it was there. The gender jab that wasn't so coded, encased in catchphrases and put through corporate bullshit. I didn't seem like a leader to him. Not because of my failure to deliver. However, I wasn't him. I gave a nod. Comprehensive. Martin's eyes narrowed. He had anticipated my breaking. Weep. Beg. Scream, perhaps. However, I had long since learned how to maintain my composure in the presence of overconfident boys with brittle egos. He said, "By the end of the day, I'll need your laptop and badge. By 5 o'clock, your access will be terminated. Your severance information is in HR calm as ever." I stood up and held out my hand. "I appreciate the clarity." He hesitantly shook it. "Good luck in your endeavors." He left with a cocky, self-satisfied appearance, as if he had just declared victory. Martin was unaware of the fact that I was more than simply another department head, and nobody else in that glass office knew either. 2 weeks ago, a shift occurred. Something significant. Additionally, I had been anxiously waiting for the ideal opportunity to utilize it. I looked at the picture on my desk, which showed my father grinning at the opening of the company's first regional office. Martin recently released me from the same company. I traced the frame's edge with my fingers. "Dad, you advised me to wait. Await the appropriate moment." So I did. I packed up my belongings. Nothing special. Just that picture, my favorite cup, and some old notes. The office buzzed like a buzzing outside, feigning inattention while someone was being carried out in real time. A couple of pitying looks. Many individuals were acting as though I didn't exist. Nobody spoke. However, I could sense the unsaid questions following me like smoke. Did she make a mistake? What went wrong for her? They weren't given the satisfaction of a breakdown by me. I felt as though the burden of 15 years had been lifted when I stepped out into the sunlight. They believed my career was over. What they had done in reality was released me. I grabbed my phone and sent my lawyer a single message. "The time has come. Get everything ready." He responded almost immediately. "I get it. Within 5 business days, a shareholder meeting can be planned." I glanced back at the gleaming, antiseptic, haughty building. Martin believed that this was the end of it. However, I would not be present as an employee the next time I entered that boardroom. As their largest stakeholder, I would be entering the market. And I would be grinning with genuine delight this time. My father's business was not the only thing I inherited. His patience for retaliation was passed down to me. I sat in a wood paneled office 2 weeks prior to Martin throwing me out like corporate trash, with a subtle scent of new leather, ancient books, and silent power. A huge envelope was set down on the desk in front of me by Mr. Harrington, my family's attorney since I had training wheels. Your father was very clear, Elena, he murmured, softly folding his hands. Your 31st birthday is not a day away. Half amused, I raised an eyebrow. What is it? A birthday card that was delayed? A road guide to hidden riches? He grinned in the manner of an elderly man who knows something you don't. To put it simply, he thought that serious things should feel important. I took a while to open it. I waited until my birthday, which was the following morning. Every time my dad would sit on that same couch, coffee in hand, reading the paper as if everything made sense in black and white type, the sun would peek through the curtains. As he would have desired, I sat in his place by myself and opened the package. It contained a legal document with a seal etched in gold and a handwritten note in his neat, methodical script. I started by reading the letter. Elena, you have reached your 30th birthday if you are reading this, which indicates that you're prepared. I've seen you put in twice as much effort for half the credit. I've witnessed you remain silent in places that weren't worthy of it. I also observed what transpired following my departure. I was aware that this was possible, that a seat at the table might not be enough for you. So I handed the table to you. In fact, my fingers trembled. I don't use metaphors when I say it. Before I could glance at the document behind the letter, I had to set it down and take a moment to catch my breath. A trust arrangement was in place, airtight, notarized, and filed. As it happens, when my father stepped down, he never sold off the majority of his shares. He clung to them, specifically 90%. Everything was put in a trust in my name and was scheduled to take effect on my 30th birthday. Not 51%, not 50%. 90, with complete voting powers, instant command. I read it 3 times, then a fourth, to confirm that I wasn't having hallucinations. I was more than just a stockholder. The predominant owner was me, so quickly that I forgot I was still in my pajamas. I called Mr. Harrington. Is this an actual thing? I asked, almost in a whisper. He made no hesitation at all. Very genuine. To prevent any public filings, your father carefully drafted it. Unless you inform them, the board is unaware of this. I sat in disbelief. I'd already held the keys after all those years of attempting to prove my place. Why didn't he simply hand it to me sooner? I inquired. Harrington's tone grew softer. He wanted you to visit the business for yourself first, which is why. To determine your desire for it, and to observe who would come forward. I felt it in my chest, but I didn't respond immediately. He was aware. Without him, my parents knew the culture would decay, that Martin would get up, that I would be disregarded, devalued, and underappreciated. He had also anticipated that I wouldn't simply leave. The following morning, I set up a follow-up meeting with Harrington. I announced, we're calling a shareholders meeting, but don't tell the board just yet. Not until I say it. A pause occurred. Elena, could you tell me what you have planned? Unaware that everything was about to change, I gazed out my window and saw the city buzzing as usual. I declared. I intend to enter that boardroom and demonstrate to them precisely who they attempted to dismiss. I didn't answer HR's. Calls. Failed to reply to the emails. Allow the exit interview to proceed. Rather, I went to a quiet downtown cafe to meet Harrington. The type of setting where nobody inquired what you did for a living or wore badges. He had a cappuccino, a folder in front of him, and the same calm expression that he usually had when I was 12 and scribbling company ideas on napkins. You're throwing a grenade into their boardroom once you file this, he remarked, indicating the folder. I was not blinking. The day they fired me, they pulled the pin. He gave a nod. The paper was clear, accurate. Power ought to be the same. Notification of a special meeting of shareholders. The executive leadership review is one item on the agenda. Martin was unaware of its imminence. That was the main idea. His projection was his power, swagger, self-assurance. His entire strategy was based on knowing just enough to crush those who didn't defend themselves. His self-assurance, however, was a house of cards. I only needed to arrive with the breeze. The meeting is scheduled for Tuesday. I didn't want it to appear hurried, but I did want it near enough to prevent them from organizing a defense. The woman who had discreetly maintained my father's trust since his death, Caroline Winters, was the next person I encountered. She didn't waste time engaging in idle chatter, like she was giving military intelligence. She slid a folder over the desk. She remarked, "I've seen that man tear down your father's legacy piece by piece. You owe him no courtesy." It contained internal performance audits, ownership certificates, voting records, and a devastating study on the corporate culture that ought to have been accompanied with a trigger warning. Contentment of employees, 38% lower. Changes in important departments, 47% higher. HR grievances are put beneath one rug after another. Caroline bluntly stated, "Martin has been inflating short-term projections to cover his long-term incompetence. If this continues for another 2 years, the business will fail." I sat there and took it all in. I let it to seep into my bones. I told her, I won't gloat or scream. Her smile was knowing and dry. "You're not required to. Let the data do the talking." After leaving her office, I walked by the old painting in the hallway, which showed my father standing outside our early headquarters with a red-dressed girl's hand resting on her shoulder. Me. He appeared younger than I had ever seen him, but steady. Yes, as if he had anticipated this moment. Speculation had escalated into outright rumors by Monday. Coworkers' texts flooded my phone. "Are you all right? What took place? Martin is acting as though he recently received a promotion. It's strange that HR isn't saying anything." I didn't answer. "Not quite yet. Let them ponder. Give Martin a chance to shine. Let him believe he had triumphed. The fall would be sweeter the more he thought I was gone." I took out the navy suit I had purchased 5 years prior for an unrealized future opportunity that evening. It fit as if it had also been waiting for this day. I rehearsed my speech. Not a speech. Only a couple of sentences. Straightforward, surgical. There was no need to exaggerate the reality. Only oxygen. Tuesday. Day in the boardroom. I was 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Be calm. Written. No entourage. All I have is a stylish folder and the law on my side. As I passed by, the receptionist glanced up and clearly performed a double take. "Elena?" I grinned. "Good morning." Harrington waited by the elevators upstairs. He appeared composed yet intent. He declared, "They're already in there." Martin's mid-sentence. "Believes it to be a strategy session." I adjusted my jacket, nodded, and inhaled. Not for very long. Together, we made our way to the frosted glass doors. And the quiet that struck when I opened the door to that boardroom, I swear, it resembled a pin falling into a gasoline pool. I was sacked because they believed I had no power. I take the head seat at the table now. When I entered, the boardroom was already humming. Talk, a little giggling, someone looking at a printed itinerary. When the door behind me snapped shut, it came to a stop like a scratch on a record. Martin was in the middle of a sentence, pacing as though he were delivering a TED Talk to a group of men wearing sports coats. Then he noticed me. In real time, his face changed from surprise to displeasure to bewilderment, the expression of a man who is attempting to comprehend why the ghost of the irrelevant woman from last week has appeared in his hallowed area. "Elena?" He raised his voice a little. "Only board members are permitted to attend this meeting." I grinned. Courteous. Expert. Measured. I then pulled out the chair and gently placed a pile of papers at the head of the table. "Exactly," I replied. I then took a seat. It was deliciously quiet. Martin quickly glanced over the papers. Then to me. Then he returned to the room as though he was waiting for someone to chuckle and inform him that this was a joke. However, nobody did. "Elena," he said once more firmly this time, as if volume might overpower me. "As I mentioned, employees aren't allowed in board-level sessions." I maintained eye contact. "I'm not an employee here," I added after pausing briefly to allow the weight to settle. "As the majority shareholder, I am present." The room's temperature fell by a full 5 degrees. In fact, you could sense it. Suddenly, even the board member who was most checked out sat up straight. "Mr. Dalton adjusted his glasses, which he had worn since the Nixon administration, and picked up the top document while wearing an old-fashioned gray suit. He scowled. This is true? He scanned the embossed seal and asked. It is, I said. I received 90% of the company's shares via a family trust. On my 30th birthday, it became active. The documents are fully compliant with corporate governance, filed, and notarized. Martin appeared to have been disconnected in the middle of his statement. His face turned blotchy pink in slow motion, and his jaw was clenched. Then he resorted to insults, as any cornered man with too much pride and too little support would. You're not serious, he sneered. This is a ruse, a personal grudge. Why would your dad? I interrupted calmly. Because he trusted me, and because he anticipated what was going to happen. Without supervision, he knew what this place could become. That touched down. It rippled through the room, and I saw it. Everyone understood what I meant, even if no one spoke it aloud. Martin had led the business in a path that was more egotistical than moral. It had become a vanity project because of him. One stitch at a time, his curtain was gradually being pushed back. To formally review the executive leadership of the company, including the position of Chief Executive Officer, I added, opening the second folder. Now Martin was on his feet, speaking up. It's a coup. You believe you can enter here and, I said. And I'm not asking. It was there. I spoke with just enough vigor to silence the room once more. Down the table, I slid a copy of the financial performance report, then another, and yet another, until there was one at each seat. Let's discuss performance. I didn't speak louder. I didn't require showmanship. The performance was in the numbers. Employee satisfaction has decreased by 38%. Key department turnover has increased by 47%. HR is currently dealing with 3 unresolved discrimination allegations. In a market where our competitors were growing, we saw flat sales growth. I observed the board taking it in. Silently, in an uncomfortable way, I turned to the second section of the report and remarked, and that's just the beginning. Overspending on executive benefits, unapproved compensation for travel. While the rest of the organization was prohibited from hiring, executive incentives were authorized. All were approved under Martin's direction. Martin did not take a seat. It appeared as though he was prepared to toss the table across the room. You're manipulating data, he yelled. You're modifying it to suit your small revenge fantasies. I gazed at him. Don't blink. No grin, I answered. I don't have to twist anything. What I possess is proof. You believed that no one with sufficient authority would ever challenge you. I left that hanging. Today, that assumption is terminated. I grabbed the final folder. This is a formal motion to remove Martin Ree as CEO immediately, with effect from the completion of the necessary documentation. A pin could have dropped. Hell, you might have heard a paperclip threatening to fall. The board secretary looked at me as if I had suddenly gained wings. You don't require a second vote, do you? He asked in a half-whisper. I declared, I own 90%. It's more than just a majority. Math is involved. Dalton sat forward after clearing his throat. With your vote alone, the motion is deemed carried in accordance with the company bylaws. Martin hit the table with a slam. The noise shattered like a bullet. This is impossible, he snarled. I gave him one final glance. Be calm. Written. I had gazed at him in the same manner when he had fired me. I did that already. There was no need to call security. He didn't engage in combat. Not at all. However, I saw something as he left. His shoulders hunched beneath the weight of a strength he had abruptly lost. His face contorted in shock. He no longer had the appearance of a leader. He appeared diminutive. The door clicked closed, and I looked back at the board. I remarked, This company deserves better. Its citizens also do. That is precisely what they will receive as of right now. With his arms folded, Dalton sat back and nodded slowly. Elena, welcome back. That was the end of it. No confetti, no dramatic music. Just the silent power change coming home. Retaliation was not the focus of the day following the coup. It has to do with fixing. That day, I didn't move inside the CEO's office. Perhaps even that week. No nameplate reveal, no coronation, and no victory lap around the executive level took place. A larger desk wasn't necessary for me to make my argument. I had to revitalize the business my father founded. In the main conference room, where Martin used to display exaggerated sales estimates and give out stale praise like candy to the same three men who had done the bare minimum and claimed credit for the maximum, I held an all hands meeting the Monday, following the shareholder meeting. However, the energy was off this time. Keep quiet. People gingerly slipped in glances to the side. Whispers in part. The front seats were empty. Nobody wanted to look at each other. The air seemed uneasy, waiting for an impact, like the silence between thunderclaps. All I had with me was a black notebook as I stood at the front. No slides, no visuals. Avoid using jargon. Only me. I said, some of you know me. A few of you are only aware of what you have heard. Hold on. I'll begin by saying that I didn't return to assume authority. I returned to rebuild confidence. Some people actually looked at me because of that. Not a nod, not grin. Simply listen. Your ideas, your sleepless nights, and your conviction that what we were creating truly mattered were the foundation of this company for years. I looked around the crowd. I used to have lunch with SAW engineers. I received proposals from analysts over email that Martin had never even looked at. Receptionists who never received a birthday email and kept everything operating smoothly. And that got lost somewhere along the way, I added. I left it there, silent and unadulterated. Then I gave a small smile. I answered, I was told last week that I lacked leadership, that this company didn't need me. And truthfully, they were somewhat correct. Some of them laughed, anxiously. But something was loosened. I said, I wasn't what they needed, because I wasn't going to clap for nothing or kiss rings. I was going to construct something tangible. Furthermore, titles don't define true leadership. Listening is key. That was my only activity for the following 2 weeks. I paid attention. In an office, I didn't lock myself in. I visited departments I had never worked in, wandered the hallways, and took a seat in the break rooms. I shut chatting long enough to hear the responses to the questions I had posed. What's flawed? What is absent? Who is taking credit and who is actually performing the work? Finding the patterns didn't take long. They were everywhere. Some swollen with fictitious authority. Others used duct tape and grit to covertly hold entire departments together. I then began to move the pieces. Little movements, but if you were listening, they were loud. Maya was elevated from customer service representative to head of client experience by me. While her employer sagged on her performance, she had been unofficially leading that team for a year. Right now, she had an office with her name on the door, a team, and a salary. I rehired Kevin, a talented product developer who had departed 6 months prior after being passed over for a position that went to someone with less expertise and a bigger voice. Kevin entered with a confused expression, as though he wasn't sure if this was genuine. Are you serious? He inquired. Dead serious, I commented. Come mend what they damaged. I redesigned HR. The dusty folders containing unanswered complaints were cleared out. Sat down with each of them. Go through them all. Spoke with those who believed their voices were lost forever. Several mid-level supervisors, who were gaslighters in suits, quiet tyrants, and charisma merchants, were fired without fanfare. Simply gone. The People First initiative, which had been in my dad's old notebook for years, was then started by me. A program that would reward creativity, advance equity, and most importantly, acknowledge unseen labor. The silent one prevails. The ordinary genius. Those who were too preoccupied in solving problems to yell at meetings. Whisper networks are no more. No more doors that are closed. While everyone is being cautious, there should be no more we're a family platitudes. Just hard labor, from actual individuals, obtaining genuine credit. I went through the hallways by myself one evening at about 9 o'clock. This place used to feel chilly, clinical, like success had a curfew and a dress code. Now, though, a conference room's laughter reached my ears. In the kitchen, someone was posting memes on Slack while eating leftovers. Desks were once again unique. Framed pictures, plants that hadn't been neglected and died. On one, there was a sticky note that read, "Water me. I'd like to survive." Like we all do. I saw a whiteboard hidden behind the main desk as I passed the engineer's bullpen. The following is written in blue marker in the corner. She returned. 3 words. twice underlined. Instead, she took charge. Martin wasn't fired by her. Simply, she returned. I just stared at it for a long minute while I stood there. For that reason, no news release, title, or boardroom victory meant more than that. Finally, on Monday of the following week, I entered the CEO's office. The time had come, not because I had to. I didn't have much with me. No new furnishings, no enormous pictures of me. One framed picture of my father and I on opening day outside the first office. He was giggling. I was 7 years old. My chin was covered in goo. I put it in the desk's corner and took a seat not in a spirit of victory, but of perseverance. There was no takeover here. It was a welcome home. They thought I was done, so they fired me. I returned a year later, this time as their future rather than an employee. I stood at the identical glass doors, where I had once left with a box and a courteous smile, exactly 1 year after Martin had fired me. This time, however, I was wearing a fitted navy suit, carrying a slim black folder, and voluntarily bearing the entire weight of the company's destiny. I gave the receptionist a nod. As soon as I walked in, she stood. Miss Wren, good morning. Elena, I said with a gentle smile. Now, we're all on the same team, she returned the smile. Actual, not practiced. The upper floor was the same upwards, the same walnut doors, the skyline in the same view. However, it felt different. The air was more relaxed. People stopped recoiling when an executive passed by. I had largely preserved Martin's former office. No nameplates in gold, no oversized screens or ego-framed phrases about leadership. Only a tidy walnut desk, a couple of plush seats, and pictures of us, not of me, lining the walls, our people, our groups, days of launch, hacking events, potlucks at the office. Important but frequently overlooked moments. So far, behind my desk was a portrait that wasn't mine. It belonged to my dad, not as a monument. As a compass, however, we had just received our quarterly report, strongest in 5 years. Customer satisfaction has increased by 23%, 41% increase in employee retention. Revenue records are being broken. But really? That didn't stay with me. How we accomplished it was what counted. No coercion, no exaggerated figures. There should be no emails sent late at night, pleading with people to bleed for a bonus they will never see. We acted morally, cooperatively, die openly. Whispering over coffee was no longer common. They were conversing in public spaces, as well as being heard. Good people weren't merely retained, they were given room to develop. We began passing the microphone, instead of hoarding authority. This company felt like humans again for the first time in a long time. The door was gently knocked on. I said, "Come in." With a clipboard in hand, Maya entered. We never told anyone that they needed to dress like a banker to be great. So even though she is now our head of client experience, she still sports her favorite beat-up Converse sneakers. Are you prepared? Grinning beneath her glasses, she posed the question. They're in the conference room waiting. I got up, picked up my folder, and followed her down the corridor. The boardroom was also a different place. Not the furnishings. The faces. Now, half of them were female. Some were in their 50s, while others were in their 40s. We had representatives from sales, design, and engineering. Not simply identical suit-wearing finance guys who believed that diversity meant bringing a woman to one annual conference. Our newest strategic advisor, Richard Tanaka, was seated in the middle of the table. Astute, thoughtful, the type of guy who spoke less and listened more. He would have pleased my father. As I seated, he nodded and said, Elena, would you say a few words before we start? I didn't intend to talk, but perhaps that's why it was important. I got to my feet, quiet space. Everyone is watching me. However, this time, it didn't feel like a close examination. It was a sense of trust. I said, I want to thank you, everyone, for holding a different belief, for taking the difficult route when remaining comfortable would have been the simpler option. I hesitated, then grinned. I was once told that I lacked leadership, you know. A few heads gave a nod. A few grinned. However, I went on, being a leader isn't about giving orders or securing first-class travel. It has to do with vision, Responsibility. The guts to say the difficult thing when it's awkward. I turned my eyes to the picture on the wall behind me. My dad. The same red ribbon from the first day of business. He used those principles to build this business. And I'm happy to report that we're at last experiencing them once more. No spectacular standing ovation was given. Not a roar of cheers. The kind of clapping that lasts longer than the sound it produces. Warm and silent. I made the long journey back to my office later that afternoon. I visited the marketing department. After completing her first major campaign, one of the interns appeared on the verge of exploding with pride. By product, I swung. In reality, the developers were making jokes among themselves. Not exhausted, not tense, simply alive. For the final day of an internship, cupcakes were prepared in the break room. I took one, sat down beside them, and spent 20 minutes listening to a chat about nothing of consequence. Because leadership is also that. Not only a big plan, however, presence. Creating an environment where people can be themselves without fear. I didn't return to exact retribution. To give the decent folks a chance to win, I returned. To create an environment where being kind was not viewed as a sign of weakness. Where an engineer with a mild voice might nonetheless advance. Where client service wasn't viewed as a dead end. When fear was not the source of power. It was out of respect. They dismissed me a year ago while grinning and making a speech about vision. Right now, we have vision now, and it is everyone's this time.